This is an interview with George Hunter III for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today, September 11th, 1996. Mr. Hunter, I want to thank you for coming and taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today.
It's a pleasure meeting you, Dr. Hunter. Let me hear that. It's a real pleasure.
Good, my pleasure. Just want to talk about some background. Tell me just a bit about your parents. Were your parents from Birmingham?
My father was, my mother was from LaGrange, Georgia, and my father's family was from LaGrange, Georgia. But my father was born here, and his mother and his father's family was from West Georgia, West Point, and LaGrange, Georgia area.
Right. How many brothers and sisters you have?
I have two sisters.
Two sisters.
Right.
And only boy.
Only son.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Where did you fit in that? Are you the oldest?
But I'm the oldest child.
Oldest child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What kind of education did your parents have?
Well, my father graduated Tuskegee, and my mother, had elementary school training into high school. But she had bad eyesight, and then it was a rural area, and they didn't really treat it right.
Yeah. What was his major? What did he study at Tuskegee?
He majored in architecture.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So did he develop his own firm, or did he work for other firms?
Well, he was one of the first black registered architects in the state of Alabama. He may have been the first, the second or third black registered architect to pass the examination. And he set up practice here in Birmingham in 1972.
Okay. So he's been in his own business since 72.
Right.
Okay. Did your mother work outside of the home?
No, she was a housewife.
Oh, okay. All right. Tell me about your neighborhood. Where did you live early in life? When you first started school?
Okay, well, when we moved into the Hill-McGard area of Birmingham, which is in the western section, we moved there right as they developed the subdivision, and I'm thinking that was somewhere around 1951 or something like that. I started Winona Elementary School in 1952, and I started with Miss Tarver in the first grade there, and I stayed there through the seventh grade. And from there, we would move to what they call the Tisby area of Birmingham.
There were many kids at that time that lived in your neighborhood that went to Riley Elementary School. Why did you go to Winona rather than to Riley?
Well, let me see. I really don't know. I don't know whether they had the type zoning as we would think of today. It may have been somewhat influenced because my father, after finishing Tuskegee, he taught at the trade school.
Oh, okay.
And that was right across the street, Cavity Wells, in the area of Winona Elementary School.
Right. Yeah, that area was known because it was really one of the few places in the state where you could go from elementary school through college. Right there in the same neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah. So you then went to Winona. What do you remember about your experience at Winona Elementary School?
Well, I remember, as a young fella, I remember it being a fairly quiet neighborhood. The area was fairly quiet. Not a lot of traffic, so we were able to play in the street fairly safely, ride our bicycles, and it was connecting neighborhoods. You had Riley and True-Velic and Gracilla, New Hill, and all these places, Pilot.
Right.
So being a young fella having a bicycle, sometimes we covered many miles riding through the neighborhood. in the summertime, there was a lot of plum trees, and that we knew where all the locations of the plum trees and blackberry patches and stuff like that.
Sounds like country living.
It was country. It really was. It was real nice being so close to the city. As youngsters, we played a lot of baseball and shot marbles and had all kind of good, nice, low budget games that we played that didn't require too much of anything. If anything, you bought you a nickel bag of marbles. You could set if you could play.
Yeah, that's right. And all of us remember those summer days.
Oh, the summer days were nice.
Those were great.
Yeah.
Now, how long were you at Winona Elementary School?
From the 1st to the 7th grade.
Through 7th grade.
Uh-huh.
What is there anything that stands out in your mind about your experience at the elementary school?
Well, what really stands out in my mind is the closeness that the students seemingly had with the teachers. The teachers were more like parent figures, and they were really close. You communicated with them real well, even through the principal, Mr. Biddings down there. I had some good teachers, and I remember them real well, even though I was so young, but I really remember how close the teachers were able to get to the students then. And it was a real nice setting,
How did you get to school?
My father worked at the trade school across the street, so I rode home with him, and then we had different parents share responsibilities in the neighborhood. My father would pick up 4 or 5 other family children, and then I think they more or less switched around, carpools.
Yeah. There was no bus going from here?
They had, we rode at an earlier age. We was at a young age where our parents transported us, but then I really think that I was eager to start riding the bus, so by the 7th grade, I really didn't want to ride. I know I didn't want to ride home. I wanted to ride the school bus, and they put us off right in the neighborhood. Yeah. And I think it's still doing it. I see the same yellow buses running up and down the street.
Right. So those school buses, in fact, many times the school bus, actually the person that drove the bus lived in the community.
Right, I would think so, yeah. We knew them pretty good. It was really, you knew the people. Right. And that was one of the closeness of the community.
And then you moved from Hillman to Titusville.
To Titusville, right.
And then you attended Center Street.
Center Street School for 1 year.
Okay, what was that transition like from Winona to Center Street?
Well, the people were not as close. They were more distant type people. When I was coming along out in the Hillman Garden area, I remember us wrestling and boxing and stuff like this, and really just, doing things the youngsters do. But when we got to the Titusville area, you found yourself, seemed like the people were more isolated to communities in that area. If you were from Titusville, you didn't go into Smithfield too easy. You wouldn't go to the south side.
You didn't find that being the case in Hillman and Brownsville and Riley?
No, I never did. If anything, Riley was about the hardest place to try to go into. Yeah. But we traveled and nobody really ever bothered us. But then you learn how to throw rocks and things out there in that area pretty good. So I remember a lot of rock battles. And we run up on some fellas and they'd throw rocks at us. We knew to leave. So then I threw a pretty fair rock myself. So I wasn't easily intimidated. Yeah. So we had a lot of rock battles and stuff like that. But never really saw violence too tough. As I got into high school, you became more familiar with, fellows having pocket knives and stuff like that. But I believe my training from the Hillman Garden area really prepared me for coming from more of a rural setting into an urban setting like Titusville was,
Well, what was your transition like from Winona Elementary, though, to Center Street School? Was there much difference in the two schools?
The teachers were not the same. You know, I said earlier that it seemed like the teachers that we know were more friendly to you knew them better. At Center Street, I was just there a year, and it might have been that factor that played into it, but I didn't really get the same kind of contact with the teachers there that I had with the teachers that we know.
But when your family moved to Titusville, how did that impact upon you in relationship to you were leaving your friends, now you had to meet new friends? Was that?
I really never had a problem with that. I have never met a stranger. And then generally, when I come in contact with people, I make them feel, pretty easy around me, and I feel easy around people. And this has just been the way it's been all through my life. I really never had problems with rowdy people or just people who might be hard to deal with or shy people or anything, because I generally just knew how to get to them. So I never had.
So that was no problem with you. The transition really was not a difficult one.
No, it wasn't a difficult transition. No, it wasn't.
Now, from Center Street School, though, you went to Ullman.
Ullman High, yeah.
Now, the transition from elementary school or junior high school to high school, what was that like?
Well, you had to be more aware of your surroundings. You had to be more aware of people around. You had to be more aware of fellas in groups, groups. We didn't call them gangs then, but I guess it amounted to pretty near the same thing. They probably wasn't as financially organized as we would think gangs are today. But you had buddies, and they pretty nearly stayed together for protection, and it was the same in my case. I had partners and buddies, and we protected each other.
Was that based upon neighborhoods?
Neighborhoods and acquaintances, yeah. Most of my friends were right around in the neighborhood that I lived. And I was fortunate to have some pretty good partners, and they wasn't scary or anything, so we traveled pretty heavy. Yeah.
How did you get back and forth from home to school?
Well, in the city system, Winona was in the county then. They had this yellow school buses. But in the city system, they had the transit bus set up, and they called them specials.
City bus.
City bus. And they would run primarily to haul students back and forth from school, and we paid a discounted price. I think it was something like a dime.
Yeah.
Unheard of today. Unheard of today. And but now your parents gave you the dime, and it was a straight shot up 6th Avenue to Ullman, so there was a lot of hitchhiking going on. You saved a dime because the lunch probably cost 50 cents.
Yeah.
So extra 20 cents a day made you feel pretty good. So as I got a little older, we were pretty good hitchhikers, my partners and I. We'd get out on, and then people would pick us up because they knew us. We'd always get us a ride. Right. Pretty easy. Never was late, and never late getting home.
Yeah. What do you remember about Ullman High School? In terms of the teachers and principals?
Well, I'm from Birmingham, and people around Birmingham, especially the people in the city, all heard of my principal, George C. Bell. He was probably one of the most famous principals, and as I remember, he was a small man of stature with a big mouth. I mean, you could hear his voice a whole block. And I think I might have been in the 9th grade, and we had in Tennessee, we might leave the school ground and run to the store and try to get back for anybody saw us or anything like that. But I remember on one occasion, Mr. Bell, who had a reputation as being a pretty firm principal, but everybody knew him, and you kind of had a little fear for him, even though he was such a small person. But I remember I left the schoolyard to go up buy me a candy bar or something and come back through the gate in a hurry. And he was on the other side of the schoolyard, and so I heard him say, "Hey, you, go home, go home." So I looked and I said, "Well, I know you don't know me." So I just went on back to class. So about 30 minutes later, the boys advisor was sending for me and asking for me by name. So I never did really figure that out, you know.
He obviously knew you.
He obviously knew everybody on the school ground, I would think. But the teachers, the system was a little different. We changed classes, what we call it. We started going to, instead of having one teacher, two teachers during the course of the day, we started having one every hour and a half. You had routines to follow, schedules to follow. You started having what they call shop classes, where you learn, where you get an opportunity to take a look at some trades that might be popular. And you had good teachers who taught well, and you had some teachers who, you know, you wish you hadn't come in contact with.
Are there any teachers that stand out in your mind?
Well, yeah, I have some fond memories of some teachers that I had in high school. And then the ones that stand out in my mind are the ones that I felt did the best job in the classrooms, you know. I had some fairly good math teachers. I was always kind of partial to math and science and history, so I had some pretty good teachers, yeah.
Well, I know that you were in high school during the period of the movement, during the 1963 demonstration.
Right now.
You were at Ulman High School.
Right.
You must have been sophomore, maybe?
Sophomore, yeah.
Yeah.
10th grade, right.
How did you get involved in the movement?
Well, I had a classmate that word was going around about the mass meeting, and I had a classmate that started going to mass meetings, and then she eventually sat in on some of the lunch counter demonstration, and then the meetings started getting more frequent, and as I remember, the first meeting that I attended was at 6th Avenue Baptist Church on the south side, which was maybe about 4 or 5 blocks from our church, from our high school. So I went to the meeting, and then right during that time, a friend of mine, like I said, we pretty nearly traveled in groups of 4 and 5. So a friend of mine got his driver's license. So then they started having mass meetings, as I remember, on 6th Avenue. There was a number of churches, 6th Avenue North. They had it at 16th Street, St. John, Thurgood, all up and down 6th Avenue. So we started, by us having transportation, we started attending the meetings.
Someone was driving?
One of my close partners was driving.
Well, what were the mass meetings like? How would you describe a mass meeting?
Well, the first mass meeting that I really paid attention to, I remember the one at 6th Avenue where we were doing most singing, and I think they were introducing some of the local civil rights leaders. But my best memory comes, I think we were at Thurgood at CME Church, which was on 6th Avenue North. And we went to a mass meeting there, and let me see now. I think Mr. Lowry, Reverend Lowry,
Joseph Lowry,
lived right near Thurgood during that time, and there was. I went to this one meeting, and I think that night I heard Reverend Gardner, and he just fascinated me to no end. I think that was one of the high points of my life. I heard him, and he was, the preachers just took turns, more or less. But he was president of the Alabama Christian movement, for human rights. And so then, in a sense, he became like a leader to us. All our partners would talk about how well he spoke, and and you know, all the things that he was talking about. And then,
What were some of the things that he talked about?
well,
You remember?
generally, we didn't really understand, I don't think, as well as some of the older people, but they were talking about things that we needed to do, how we needed to achieve certain rights and stuff like this. But they really didn't strike me as they did later, you know. I think we were pretty nearly there because it was something happening that was different from our regular routines.
Action.
And then, well, met a lot of young ladies there too, you know, so it was, every day we would say, hey man, the meeting is at such and such a church, and we were ready to go that evening. And most of them started in the evening. We'd get there early enough. So really, we were sitting around right among the brain thrust in most cases, sitting there looking at them. We were not really knowing what they were talking about, but Reverend Shuttlesworth, Reverend A.D. King, I remember just always being in and around them. But now this was months before the big civil rights
So you were actually attending meetings prior to
right
when the children got involved. You got involved, I think, on May 2nd.
May 2nd and May 3rd. May 2nd. Yesterday I went to jail, but we were we were during the latter part of the winter. We were attending the mass meetings, you know, and we were involved in. I remember, you know, there was so many people from Urban coming. Some people would walk. They would walk from near Memorial Park over to the 6th Avenue area, which if you knew the shortcuts, it wasn't but half a mile or so, a mile and a half, maybe a mile. And then those of us who had transportation, we would drive there. But all my friends would.
Did you ever get involved in the demonstrations before May?
We had a case where some of the students kind of got together and boycotted a hamburger store that we didn't think was doing us right. And
how effective was the boycott?
Well, they eventually changed their policy. This particular place was right across from my high school. And they had as I remember, they had a square painted on the floor. And all of the students all of the black people that came in there had to stand inside this square. And if the square was full, you had to wait outside until the people bought their hamburgers and, you know, left and made more space in this painted area.
How large of an area was this square?
It seemed like it might have been about 8 feet by 8 feet.
So you could get...
You could stand 15, 16 people there. You know.
But after that was filled, then
you had to wait.
Nobody else could come in.
Right. So then they had booths and table areas that the white people sat in, and they were sitting, drinking coffee and eating the hamburgers.
Do you remember the name of the place?
No, I don't.
But it was directly
across.
It was 6th Avenue?
It was on the corner of 6th Avenue and 12th Street on the northeast corner, you know, so there's a grocery store there now.
Right.
And it was in the same building as the grocery store is on the end.
Well, I know that there are a number of people that have talked with me and said that when they got involved and they were students, they would either go to school and then leave school and march with a number of people to the demonstrations, or they would leave home and not go and sometimes parents wouldn't know that they were not going to school, but they would go direct. What was the way that you...
Well, now, you mean that when during the day of the actual demonstration?
That's right, yes.
Oh, okay, now see, we were so active in the mass meetings that we would take information back to other students, you know, let them know that the mass meeting would be at this particular church or that particular church. So we knew exactly. Well, we didn't know exactly what would happen, but we knew that on May 2nd, it was supposed to be a big day of marching. So we didn't go to school. We just left home, and with our parents' blessing at that. Because our parents,
your parents approved your going and participating?
they knew that we were active in the mass meetings, so they knew exactly. And then we would keep them informed about what was happening. And I'm saying, man, we would, if they had a mass meeting, we were there, you know. And it was constantly going from church to church. And we'd go back and tell other students where the meeting would be, what we talked about the day before. So, and then we got so involved in the mass meeting. What happened, when we started coming, it was so early, but then when we first started going, it was just the local. I'm saying Reverend Gardner was our man, you know, Rodney Luther King was a name somewhere.
Sure.
But Reverend Gardner, Reverend Shuttlesworth, they were the leaders. As far, if I'm not mistaken, Reverend Gardner was president, and Reverend Shuttlesworth was vice president or something like that.
Just the reverse.
Reverse, okay, I knew it was something like that. But then when the national leaders started coming in, then we met Reverend James Bell. And so more or less, whenever we had a mass meeting, we would flock to Reverend Bell. And he knew all of us, and we knew him, and then he would keep us informed, telling us to go back and talk to other students. But so when we got to the meeting, the group that I was with, it didn't like number 5 or 6, 7. And we just go and hang around Reverend Bell, and he got to be kind of friendly with us. Then he was always leading the songs, he'd be the leader, and then we'd sing along with him and behind him. But he kind of developed into something like we had a name for him, student organizer. Well, I forgot what we called.
You all flocked to him.
We flocked to him, and whenever he saw us,
he was sort of your hook to the movement.
To the movement, right?
Now, there were times when individuals come to various schools, and they would stand out in the street because the schools usually wouldn't allow them in,
right?
And they would try to encourage students. Did that happen at all?
Well, we were doing so much encouraging ourselves. You would always see people around in the neighborhood. You'd also see at the mass meeting, you knew they were involved, and when you saw them, you knew what their purpose was. Right. But, and like I say, in our case, we were visiting so much, we knew about as much as we figured we needed to know.
Yeah, so they didn't have to put as much effort at Almond because you guys were so active,
right?
And you could handle that. Were there discussions of the movement and what was happening at that time in your classes?
No, never.
None whatsoever. What when you guys started to leave school, the teachers in any way attempt to intercede?
Well, now, in my case, I never witnessed any of that because the day of the civil rights, on May 2nd, like I say, we left home.
You didn't go to school that day.
And I mean, we were probably downtown here in that 16th Street Baptist Church before school opened. And as a matter of fact, we were so early there, I remember the church filling up. We were right down front, right with Reverend Bevan, and sometimes we see Andrew Young or Jesse Jackson or some of the others.
How do you what was the feeling like that day on the 2nd? And this was the first day that the children would get involved. First day of children march. How would you describe?
Well, there had been so many mass meetings, and the attendance would vary, and sometimes, but during that time, the participation was just super, just mass, and so it was so different because there was so many people assembling at one time. When we would go to some mass meeting, might be 75 folks there. The one meeting might have 200 people there, but this day the church was filling up, so we knew to keep our position in the church because people were steadily coming, and you could see them coming up the steps and stuff like that. So on that particular morning, we were in the main sanctuary. Now we started out in the basement, then we went to the main sanctuary, and we were on the right side on the 16th Street side, and then they asked for volunteers who was willing to go to jail that day, right away. And so I being so macho and gung-ho, we immediately volunteered. But before we left the main sanctuary, they said, okay, now this is supposed to be a nonviolent demonstration. And anybody got weapons, we want you to, we want to take up your weapon. They got, I'm thinking they had something like a soda box, you know, drinking soda drink case, you know, and they started passing the box down the row. Man, there was so many knives. By the time the box got about a row and a half, it would fill up. The box was maybe about 6-7 inches deep, and maybe about 20 inches wide, and maybe, you know, but the box filled up. And so after they took up the weapon, the group that I was with, we went downstairs with Reverend Bevel and some of the others. And they gave us instructions that we were to draw the police attention. And our job was to go out the front of the church, form in groups of 2 right at the bottom of the step, and then started marching east up 6th Avenue. And we were told that while we were doing this, other groups were receiving instructions to go to different points around the city. But we were, and I may have been in the first group that was arrested, because when we left the church, we started up the street, we started singing. I'm thinking Reverend Bevel would probably lead the song on one of my friends who imitated Reverend right down to the max. So, and as I remember, it may have been maybe about 24 of us, maybe 30. And we started out into, most of those were high school students, because we were really involved in mass media. And so we started up 6th Avenue, and we got a block and a half, and then we were approached by a white policeman with a bullhorn saying, "Stop, you violated city ordinance," and he gave us some number. Asked us if we had a permit, and then someone from the crowd on lead, where we had sort of like a little captain leading the group. And it was a young lady, one of my classmates. And she answered, no, we didn't. And so they said, call the paddy wagon. So we standing there thinking that they had to call the paddy wagon. We were parked. The paddy wagon truck was parked right side of us, I believe. Took about 10 seconds to get there. So they packed as many as they could in the paddy wagon, and we were taking directly to city jail. And in that group, I remember A.D. King being in that group, and where they processed us first, and they took time to fingerprint us and all of that. Then they put us in a large, like, day room cell. But as we first got in this cell, Martin Luther King himself was there, his brother A.D. King, and some of the others.
They had been arrested as well.
Yeah, they see, because I don't know how long we lingered around from the time we were first arrested, but by the time they filled up this area, Martin Luther King was there, and his brother stayed in there with us, and some other preachers stayed in there. But this area probably could have held maybe about 7,500 people, but they had maybe 300, 400 people in there, packed in there. But like I say, we had some of the some of the the mass movement preachers in there. So we had worship services and stuff like this, freedom songs, and time went by pretty good. And we stayed there for 5 days.
5 days. What was that like? I mean, what did you do for 5 days?
During the day, you mill around, and almost any time they might call a worship service, and somebody will preach.
You didn't do any work.
The only
city
work,
didn't put you to work.
all the work you could do was making sure that toward sundown you had you a claim spot. Otherwise, you'd have to stand up and sleep.
Oh,
So what you do, you find your place along the wall, on the floor, and you establish that as your territory. And then at night you had the opportunity to lay flat on it. See, because it was 2 areas. It was like a little day room or something. And then you went out of a few doors into an area where they had a latrine area to one side, and you could see the sky in this area, but lined up toward one end, they had maybe 10, 12 commodes. But if you sat on the commode, you were sitting right there in front of everybody. And so you, toward the evening, after we finished with whatever kind of services we would have, you would try to get on the inside to claim a spot, because if you had to claim a spot outside in the rain, you were in bad shape.
So were most of the people there, were they your friends from Oman?
Well, no, there were so many people, but a number of them were. Yeah, I imagine in my traveling circle, it was 6 or 7 of us.
Were all of them?
Yeah, all of us were in jail together, right? And we protected each other. And we looked out for each other, and we pooled our money, and somehow we were able to buy candy bars, because we wasn't accustomed to eating the type food, and I think the food probably got even of a lesser standard once they packed all these people in there. So you get a candy bar, and then you eat off it most of the day. And so
What were the treatments like by the jailers?
Going in, they were talking a little rough and handling your fingers rough. Like I said, they were fingerprinting us, so they were rolling people's fingers around kind of rough. I think the jail attendants looked up and was so outnumbered, they kind of eased their feelings about what was going on. They didn't trouble us very much because it was just so many. So the less they had to come in contact with them, I think the better off they felt. And during the time after we were put in this cell situation, very seldom, every now and then you might see somebody opening the door, closing the door, but you didn't really come in contact with them anymore like that anymore. And it just kept filling up. After a while, there were so many people there. They had to stop fingerprinting because they were coming in so fast, and they were just packing them into different areas, and then they might come into the area and take the group out. But we stayed in the same area for the entire 5 days.
How did you get out?
They let us out one day. They let us out, and we were told that we were bailed out. And that night, we went to a meeting. I'm thinking it was at St. John. And that night, Constable Motley was there, Martin Luther King. Oh man, everybody was there. I mean,
What was the reception like for you guys that had been in jail?
well, they put us all right down front, in front of the podium, and gave us little small American flags. And so we sat around down on the floor and in front of the podium, and Martin Luther King preached, and Constable Miley told us about the case, and different people from what I can remember.
What was the reception like when you went back to school?
Well, seemingly like it was kind of hush more than anything else. it was my understanding that the establishment had so much pressure on the schools and the teachers and some principals that you really didn't. There was not much going on the schoolyard, except other than during lunch hour or something, you might get in the corner and talk about it. But as far as being around teachers and things, it just wasn't much noise and much talking about it.
Were you involved in the movement even after this period, after May? I think the children participated from May 2nd until at least May 12th when the bombing took place.
We never did stop going to mass meeting, and then that summer we went to the March on Washington.
You did attend the March on Washington?
I think whenever we had the mass meeting from that point on, we attended until I guess they just died out.
How did you get to Washington?
I'm thinking, as I remember, we had to pay to ride. They didn't furnish the bus trip. We paid and we caught the bus, and I think
just the regular bus, or was there a charter bus?
No, they had charter buses. I think they might have had maybe 4 or 5 charter buses. And we left here, and as we left, started up the East Coast, the line just got longer and longer. But we had maybe 4, 5, or 6 buses that left, I'm thinking right around 16th Street, Baptist Church area.
So you said you got close to Washington, there were more buses?
Yeah, when we stopped, we would see, it might have been 12, 15 buses, all of them going the same way and traveling. We picked up more buses the closer we got to DC. And
how was that experience?
It was really something that I'll never forget. First off, seeing Washington and seeing all of the different monuments and attractions that you see when you go to Washington. And then one of the most unique situations about it was I grew up in a segregated society, and just seeing and mingling with a number of white people, and not having had that experience, You come in contact with white people, but,
How did that impact
you? It let me know that there were other people interested in what we were doing other than just the blacks that you came in contact constantly. You start seeing people, and then you can recognize people from all over the world being there. Different nationality of people, more white people than you would have thought. And then all of the leaders and the list of entertainers and being able to sit right in front of the Lincoln Monument, right around the pool. And we were lucky and was always right down front. I mean, we were always.
Were you and your 6 buddies together?
Yeah,
all of them.
All of us went. Yeah. So we took care of each other.
Yeah. Well, that was quite a festive occasion, man.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure you learned a lot. The next month, or in September, back here in Birmingham, the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed.
Right, and we were still involved in the mass meeting, and one of my close friends was killed in the bombing. A young lady named Cynthia Wesley. So the group that I was always with, we were asked to serve as pallbearer, and so that was another time that
How did you know Cynthia?
We were part of a club called the Cavaliers. It was a little social and savings club, we called it.
In the community?
In the community. Well, it was primarily in the schools and the community because, like I say, Birmingham was a strange city about movement. In some places, people actually grew up in neighborhoods and except for occasionally going to downtown Birmingham, they actually stayed in those neighborhoods. I got a friend who I speak to quite frequently, and he tells me that from elementary school through high school, all through high school, he was in his neighborhood and visiting downtown Birmingham, going to movies and stuff, and then back to his neighborhood. That he really never really did anything beyond that until he decided to go to Miles College and he went to Fairfield. And that's basically where it was. People actually stayed in their neighborhood, inside. If you from Cottesville, you could have spent 75% of your life right in that area. And it was same with Smithfield and something. But the club that I was in, we had club members from all around the city. And the group that I was in, we was always fortunate enough to have transportation. So we were all over the city. So we got to know people and never really worried about being ran out of certain neighborhoods and stuff like that. So we moved around pretty.
So Cynthia was part of one.
And she was part of our club. She went to Parker. But remember, we had club members at Parker and all other high schools.
Yeah. Do you remember the day that it happened?
I remember here, I was at church, and our church was on the south side. I remember hearing the bomb, and then hearing the blast, and later, well, before we went to 11 o'clock worship service, word had gotten that there was a bomb.
When did you find out? When did you find out that your friend had been killed?
It had to be later that afternoon after church service. You had a number of people who left church and came down into the area. I didn't particularly come that day. I don't remember my parents coming, but before night we knew, and I also knew Denise McNair. She was a young girl in the community, and I knew her grandparents. My father had done some architectural work for their family for years, and I knew her, but she was a young, kind of young then. But I knew her, and I think she knew me.
And you all served as pallbearers.
Yeah, for Cynthia's funeral.
And where was the funeral?
Let's see now. If I'm not mistaken, it was held at St. John. It was held at St. John, and she was buried in the cemetery out by the airport. I think it was St. John.
Yeah. So were you then active in the movement throughout your high school career?
Until I would attend the mass meetings, and we pretty nearly knew what was going on most of the time until I guess they started. It started getting smaller. And that was toward the end of my senior year. But we would always attend the mass meeting. We got a lot of friends that we met going to the meetings, and that just made us have that much more travel area that we could deal with. So until I left going to college, I think I was pretty well off and on involved in.
What, did you go to college right after high school?
Right.
What college?
Kentucky State in Frankfort, Kentucky.
How did you decide upon Kentucky State?
Being influenced by peers. I don't know. I believe travel just, I guess, broadening my horizon one of the things that I was always in a position to move around. And once we got into the 12th grade, we were moving around from Alabama State to Tuskegee and Alabama A&M by having friends there who were either members of our club, just high school friends. So we were always fortunate enough to travel. And I think it later influenced me to get private pilot's license. I went and got private pilot's license and traveled even more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something that was just part of my life.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the movement benefited you?
Well, oh man, that's a hard question. You accommodations were one thing, and then they took down all of the signs, and you were able to go places that you had probably just heard of in the past. I didn't get the opportunity to go to school with white children because I was alone in high school. So I've been trying to get the answer to that question. That's probably the question. You were able to come in contact with white people more readily, and then it was mostly either coming in contact with them in some kind of service capacity or something like that. They didn't move into the neighborhood. We didn't move into their neighborhood any faster.
The society basically remained segregated as far as
That's what
communities are concerned and schools, but there were some entities that did desegregate. For instance, buses.
You could sit on the bus where you wanted. You could go to the toilets without signs, and you could skip the water faucet that shot the hot warm water and drink cold water.
Mm-hmm.
The attitude was still there. The police didn't necessarily change. And coming along, you would hear about different police that was harassing people. But if you travel the way we travel, we knew what areas to avoid, what areas, the most direct route might not have been the best route. So we had to go through our communities to get to other communities when we could have went through the white neighborhood and been there 15, 20 minutes early. In Birmingham, you really didn't see a whole lot of change. Just signs coming down more than anything else.
Do you think that the movement had any impact on you personally, long term? Did you see anything?
The movement, and the time that I came along, and the things that were happening nationwide probably affected me more than anything, because the Vietnam War started, and right after college I was drafted into the service, which really was the first opportunity that I had to integrate into the white society at all. Otherwise, it was just a segregated situation that just continued.
Did you go into the Army?
I went into the Army.
Was that enlisted or?
Well, I went in as an enlisted person. When I first went to get my physical and stuff, it was as if it was a bus trip for my high school. I mean, all of the students that they gave was pretty nearly 4 years, and then all of the students that I had graduated with. They called all us the same day, put us all in from the same neighborhood, put us all on the same bus. So we had a High bus trip to Montgomery to take the physical.
Oh, was that right?
I mean, man, it was like they parked on the corner in front of the school. I mean, the bus was just full of. I mean, I knew pretty nearly everybody on the bus.
This was in high school.
This was after. This was during the after
high school.
After college.
Oh.
And this was during when I went into service in '68. So this was
At the height of the
Vietnam, and I was just blessed going through that. I was lucky enough. I scored fairly high on the Army entrance exam, and they tried to give me officers candidate schools, and I talked to every branch of service. As a matter of fact, the bus that I went down there on, that the next day or whenever they sent the bus back without me. And then they took me and put me in an interview room. And then I had each branch of service to come in and try to get me to join with them, and they would offer me different things to join, and I would be able to go in as an officer candidate if I took 1 or 2 additional years. But now, I didn't, the society wasn't my society, so I didn't see where I should be fighting, doing any kind of fighting for a society that I didn't really feel like I was totally a part of. But now it was also an obligation. So I think they kept me there a day, and I a whole day after my friends left, and I probably left the next morning going back. So I spent the night there, 2 nights. But I was firm in my belief that just let me go home, and if you draft me, you can have me. I don't want another year, and if I can get by, I don't want that first day. I don't want to have anything to do with the military. But when they finally drafted me, right during the time I was in basic training, I was in the second 8-week session. You basic training 8 weeks, then your job training for 8 weeks. I think right during the beginning of the job training when Martin Luther King was killed, and that really just, I was messed up from that point on.
Yeah. What kind of training did you?
Well, like I said, I scored pretty high on the Army entrance exam, so they gave me MP training. They called it 96B10, and that had something to do with your score. So I was sent through military police training school at Augusta, Georgia. And then the ironic thing, when they lined us up in rank, they were reading off the orders, and they came down the row. And then they started at A's, they read through A's, they got to the F's, they got to the G's. In the middle of the G's, they switched from Vietnam to Anchorage, Alaska. They went through the H's, which included me, got part of the J's, and they sent about 8 of us to Anchorage, Alaska, and the entire company that I was in went to Vietnam. I mean, man, you talking about being blessed. And so I spent my 2 years in Anchorage.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to say before we conclude?
Well, the civil rights struggle changed a lot of things, and I guess, but it didn't really, the way I feel, it didn't really change the real heart of America. My father is a registered architect, and I have the opportunity to work with him and to see how the finances go between the races and how finances is used in my community. I really think that there's a serious problem. If I think the dream was to be completed, it would need to include some kind of financial revolution. that would make things a little more equal and a little fairer. And if this should happen, maybe the black community could take care of itself a little better, and then I think Martin Luther King dream could be somewhat closer to being a reality. And until this happens, I think that we'll have the problems that we have. And I think that the leaders will always have to be less than the leaders that they should be, because it's not fair. And if it was fair, I really think we could do a better job policing our communities and creating jobs. And that's, if we could create the jobs, then I think that it would be all the travel that I've done and the little that I had to do with the journey that I've traveled, and just by being here, being placed here by God, I think it would be better. I was, when they opened the Civil Rights Institute here in Birmingham, I was on a group, and it really never dawned on me, but an author that wrote Parting of the Waters with Martin Luther King made a statement about how the young people, the children of Birmingham, made an impact on the world and created more change in a short time than probably any other group of people in the history of the world. And I think this is true, and I'm really proud that I was able to be a part of that. But in Birmingham, the place where it started, we didn't benefit, I don't think, as well as some of the other cities around the country. And we still not benefiting. So,
what do you think needs to be done before we benefit? And why have we not benefit?
In our situation, it goes to I would say it goes to people feelings. People really hide the way they feel, I would think, but it goes to the economics of it. I mean, if we had the shopping centers and the stores that you see in other communities, then we would protect them. You know, one of the biggest drawbacks that the financial institution had is the fact that the black people might kill it off each other real quick. And so therefore, a black person who's able and who has some influence, his worth is not worth anything, because he may not be living the next few days or the next week. Even though his idea might be able to go on for years and years after him, we can't put money into the community because it's high risk and high crime. But I don't go along with that idea. I think that's segregation.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time. It looks like we're going to open up another avenue, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Well, now it's a pleasure meeting you, like I said, and I'm serious about that. And I'm available. I'm on the downhill side of life, the way I see it. It's not like it was when I was in the civil rights struggle, because I could run all day. But now I'm getting a little gray, and something better happened in a hurry. I might not be able to see the dream.
That's what all of us are saying now. So it's time for something to happen.
Time for something to happen, right?
Thank you very much.
All right.